Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2023. Now listen, I am nice 364 days out of the year. Today is my one day where I will not be nice. And anyone who says, but Riley, what about that time? No, I am nice 364 days out of the year. That is true, you can fact check it. Normally, I don't really make my worst books of the year video because I typically don't have a ton of worst books. However, this year was rough. This year was very rough. I had more one-star books this year than previous years combined. I went into 2023 saying this is my year to not be a hater, and it turns out I was born to be a hater. So 2024, we are embracing the hater energy. I have a lot of books to talk about here. They're really in no order. I don't know what the worst one would be. No, I do know. I do know what the worst one is. We'll get there. We'll get there. Oh my god, pace yourself, Riley. So first up, we have My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This one I was super excited to get into because everything that I heard about the book was like, oh, it's about a married couple who kill people together. They're like serial killers in love. And I just thought it was gonna be like a fun, like good for her, good for them, serial killers, married, like Mr. and Mrs. Smith kind of vibes. But that's not what it was. I was gaslit into reading this book about this pitiful, annoying man. Like the entire book was just about the husband. I'm like, it's called My Lovely Wife, but the whole book is about the husband? And I did not care 1 second about this man. I did not. He was annoying. All he did was complain and whine and bitch. And I'm like, where's my exciting, good for her, serial killer, killing people book? Like, what is, I hated it. I was so annoyed. I hated the ending. This is definitely one of those books that I went into it thinking it was something else, and what I had in my mind was way better. And I'm mad about it. The next one is The Fisherman. This book is definitely like a worst book, but it's kind of, the reason why I think it's a worst book is kind of funny. This book is basically split up into 3 parts. The first part is about these 2 friends who are fishing together. And I was like, oh my god, this is so boring. All I'm reading about is these 2 men fishing. I'm like, I don't care about fishing. The second part is a short story that is being told to those 2 men who are fishing. And I was like, okay, finally, we're done with the fishing. We're getting into the book. We're being told this short story. The short story, which actually not a short story, gonna be honest, a pretty long story, was so boring that I was like, let's get back to the fishing. Tell me more about them fish, because it was so dull and boring. It moved so slow. If I were these 2 men being told this long ass boring story, I would have got up and I would have left. I would have been like, I gotta go to the bathroom and slip out the back door. It really should have been a novella. It was too long, too drawn out, boring, and it made me wish I was reading about fishing. That is unacceptable. Next up, we have Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I'm about to say, except I'm not sorry because this book was terrible. This was the most pretentious, overwritten pile of garbage that I have ever read. I'm like, what are the girlies reading? Because everybody on Goodreads is like, the writing. The writing. Did we read the same thing? It was very much giving like deep Tumblr text post vibes of just nonsense. Like it was just a lot of nonsense and so many words to say such little things. And then I also just hated the characters, which is terrible for a book that is pretty much just 2 characters talking to each other. That's the concept of the book, is like 2 characters having 6 conversations. So the whole book is really just them talking to each other. And when I tell you, I would rather fling myself out a window than talk to either of these characters. So reading an entire book of them just talking, I'm like, when are they gonna stop? The next one was such a disappointment, and that was How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, who I love. I think I've read all of his books except for one, and I really love him. He's one of my favorite horror authors, so I was so excited for this one. And I think what makes this one so disappointing is that I was loving it. I was feeling like this was gonna be my favorite Grady Hendrix book. I was loving the discussions around grief, this very complicated sibling dynamic. Like, it had me in the beginning. It really had me. And then that fucking puppet showed up. This book was about a puppet named Poppin. From the second that stupid puppet showed up, the book was done for me. Because no matter how much I was loving it, puppet would be like in the corner. I'm like, all this about a puppet. Give me anything. Literally anything but a puppet. Fling that thing in a fire and move on. Like, pick it up, throw it in a wood chipper, move on. Let's move on. It's a puppet. Also, the audiobook was terrible. If you do plan to read this, do not listen to the audiobook because the voice of the puppet sounds like Mickey Mouse. So even if you could potentially be scared of a puppet, you will not be scared of the puppet in the audiobook because it genuinely sounds like Mickey Mouse. This little Mickey Mouse talking thing is what we're supposed to be afraid of. I genuinely question why Grady Hendrix wrote potentially his best book and then ruined it with a puppet. Pop in the puppet. If you have one hater, it is me. If you have no haters, I am dead. The next book is Tender is the Flesh, which I do feel a little bad putting this book on the list because when I read it, I said that I loved the writing and I would read another book from this author, but I did give it 1 star, which feels like I have to put it on this list for that reason because I did not enjoy a single second reading this book. And this book definitely is what made me realize this year I don't like gross horror. Horror that is centered or primarily around gross descriptions, it's just not for me. That's not for me. When I read horror, I want to be scared. I don't want to throw up. And this book made me feel like I was going to throw up. So more so than any of the other books where I just feel like they were bad books, this one, it's not for me. There's a couple other books on this list that fall into that gross horror category. And I now know that about myself. That's just not for me. And I will not pick them up anymore because all the gross horror that I read this year, I gave 1 star. The next one is The Writing Retreat, which I kind of feel like I am alone here on this cliff of hating this book because every single one of my friends who's read this gave it 5 stars. It's like their favorite book of the year. Everybody loves this book and I'm just sitting here like, this one? This is the girl we all love? My problem with this book was that it was messy. And not just in the plot. Like, yes, the plot was very messy in a way that was just super unbelievable. Didn't really make any sense. But the writing was so messy. There were so many inconsistencies and plot holes, writing mistakes, just like so many things that kept taking me out of the story. I didn't even have the chance to enjoy it because there was just so much sloppiness. And that is such a big pet peeve of mine. I don't get that one. I really don't get it. And I want to get it. Why don't I love this like everybody else did? The next one is another sad one, and that is Finley Donovan Jumps the Gun. This is the 3rd book in the Finley Donovan series, and pretty much each book has gone down for me. I loved book 1. Book 2 was still good. I gave it 4 stars. This one was terrible, and I'm quitting the series. I will not be continuing anymore. This is a mystery series, so tell me why we are 3 books in and the mysteries are not solved. What is happening here? Like, genuinely, what is happening here? Why are the mysteries not solved? There's also a love triangle that started in book 1 and is still dragged out to book 3. I just feel like this is a clear case of this should not have been a series. I don't think that this author knows how to write a series or plot a series. It feels very much like we're just making it up as we go along, and it's super, super dragged out. I feel like it lost the like sparkle that book 1 had for me, and I will no longer be continuing. The next one is Mafly. This is another one of the gross horror books that I read and another example of why I will not be reading gross horror anymore. My issue with this one was different from Tender as a Flesh, where I just feel like this one was a bad book for the sole reason that I didn't believe it. With Tender as a Flesh, it was so gross and disturbing. I believed every second of that book. This one, I did not believe it. This one follows a character named Maeve, who is a psychotic serial killer who has very disturbing sexual fantasies, but I didn't believe it. It felt very much like somebody who is just trying to be so wild and crazy for attention, but not because that's really what she wants or desires. Like, bring me on the journey, make me believe it, and I didn't. It felt very much just like, I'm so quirky and crazy. This was a debut book, and I do feel like that really showed in the writing. There was just a lot of things that I felt like could be done to make it feel more believable, but it really felt like a lot of the gross elements of this book weren't done for a purpose. They were just done to elicit a strong reaction from the reader, and I don't like that. To me, that feels like manipulative writing. The next one is We Need to Do Something by Max Booth. This is a short horror novella that I did not enjoy a single second of. It was very short, and I hated every minute of it. The entire book, it's basically about a family who gets trapped in a bathroom together during a tornado, and the entire book is really just them arguing with each other. After a certain point, I'm like, can y'all shut up? Actually, can you shut up? I was so sick of hearing them argue. I kind of was just like, can they all die? But what really tipped me over the edge of hating this book was the amount of times that the words farts and butts were mentioned. For what reason? For what reason? The first couple times I'm like, okay, one of the characters is a little boy and he's like, you know, little boy crass humor, but then he just kept talking about it and kept talking about it and kept talking about it and kept talking about it. And I'm just like, every other page was like farts, butts, farts, butts, farts. But I'm like, okay, actually, can this little boy die? So I don't have to hear about farts and butts anymore. Oh my God, this next one, I am so disappointed by this one. And that is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead, my favorite thriller author. If I could call up Miss Ashley Winstead and say, Miss Ashley, please tell me why you wrote 2 of the best thrillers I have ever read and then decided to publish your AU Swamp Twilight fanfiction? Why? I need an explanation. This was Twilight in the Swamp. The entire mystery plot of it with this like southern religious town, I did not care about the mystery plot at all. That was so boring to me. But this book was just, it was like, I don't know what it was trying to be. Was it trying to be like romancy Twilight fan fiction? Was it trying to be like Where the Crawdad Sings? Like, I don't know. Also, that scene with the bear, what was that? Like, actually, what was that? We're not even gonna talk about the ending. No words, no words. You know, I'm gonna pretend that Ashley Winstead did not write this for my own mental sanity. Before we talk about my actual worst book of the year, I do want to mention 3 books that I DNF'd because I actually don't DNF books very often. For me to DNF a book, it has to be pretty bad. First one is Dragonfall. This one I was so excited about. I was very much on like a dragon hype train and I read a bunch of dragon books, and this was very, very disappointing because first of all, there were no dragons. It was not about dragons because the dragon characters shape-shifted into humans for like 90% of the book. So there's no actual dragons in it, but the writing was so bad. The writing was so bad. This is not a long book at all. It's like just around 300 pages and it was so slow. It was so slow. I got like halfway into it and realized nothing has happened. Another thing that I hated about the writing was there were 3 different POVs and each POV changed perspective. So one of the POVs was first person, another POV was second person, and the third POV was third person. Switching it up like that every single chapter, the way that it was done was so jarring. I feel like there's only one author I've ever seen successfully do this, and I'm sorry, you cannot outdo the doer, Miss N.K. Jemisin. The next one that I DNF'd is What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall, who is an author that I love. This was her first adult thriller, and I hate to say it, it was just so boring and basic. I predicted the entire plot after 30 pages, and then I ended up Googling spoilers to see if I was correct, and I was. So I DNF'd it. I will definitely give her next thriller a chance because I love her YA horror books so much, but this was such a letdown. And then the other one that I DNF'd was Sister Maiden Monster. This is another gross horror book that I actually was really enjoying. This book is basically like 3 short stories, each following a different female character. I really liked the first story, but the second story I hated, and that was where I DNF'd it. The second story is following a character who only orgasms by murdering people in like super brutal ways, and being in her mind was just so unsettling and disturbing, and I hated it. And again, like the gross horror elements of it. Honestly, if you liked Mafly, you will probably love Sister Maiden Monster. Those books are probably best friends, but I fully decided to DNF it when there was a really disturbing joke made about a real life child murder and SA victim, and that just disturbed me so much. I was like, no. Okay, now my worst book of the year, which is super disappointing because this is a sequel to a book that I was gonna put on my favorite books of the year, which I'm not putting that on there anymore because this book made me retroactively hate that book, and that is Iron Flame. Can we just have a moment of silence? Okay, a moment of silence for past Riley and her mistakes, her indiscretions. The very worst thing about this book is that it made me look like a clown, okay? It made me look like a fool. I loved Fourth Wing, and here's the thing, like, do I actually hate Fourth Wing? No. I liked Fourth Wing. Did I think it was the best book ever? No. There were plot holes, the writing wasn't great, the characters were a little annoying, but the thing is about that book was I just had so much fun while I was reading it. When I read, I just want to be entertained, and if you can entertain me on that level, then I'm having a great time. Iron Flame, however, was a hot pile of steaming garbage, and I was not live, laugh, loving. I was die, cry, hating. It was absurdly long, and you cannot convince me that a single person edited this book. The first 300 pages were basically just a repeat of book 1. All of that could have been condensed into like 50 pages. The main characters, Violet and Xaden, were so annoying in this book because they would not stop fighting and arguing to the point where I'm like, break up or die. Please, one of you. Either break up or can one of you die, because I'm so sick of this. I love when 2 characters who are like romantic interests are fighting each other before they get together, because then the fighting is like, ooh, sexual tension. After they get together and they keep fighting, break up, because why are you together? This book was just horrible. It was messy. It made me very angry because of the sloppiness, how quickly it was published. You could tell they did not give two shits about the quality of the book in the writing or the actual physical book. And like, I was actually offended. I'm like, I really sat up here and I defended book one and you made me look like an idiot. That is the worst crime in the world. And that is why Iron Flame gets the honor of being the biggest dumpster garbage fire of the year. So those are all the worst books that I read in 2023. And now I'm gonna go back to not being mean ever and only being nice. So if you see me being mean, no, you're wrong. I'm only mean one day of the year. The next video that you will see will be my best books of the year, where I will be much more positive and gushing about all of my favorite books that I read. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe and check out my Patreon where I post tons of exclusive content. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!